The first time Saran asked me to become her boyfriend, I was kneeling beneath a wedding stage with electrical tape between my teeth, while the groom above me promised eternal honesty to a woman he had cheated on 3 weeks earlier. I knew about the cheating because I had repaired the microphone that recorded his argument in the storage room. I also knew better than to involve myself in rich people's vows. My job was to make lies sound clear through expensive speakers. My name was Han Jaiwan. I was 26, worked as a freelance audio technician, and lived in a rooftop room where rain reached the floor before my salary reached my bank account. Saran stood beside the stage stairs wearing a cream business suit and an expression that made the wedding planners straighten their backs. She was the only granddaughter of Yu Jiangtie, founder of Myeong Hotels and Celebrations. My father's debt was not dramatic enough for television. It came from years of ordinary treatment, ordinary interest, and ordinary letters printed in red. Every time I nearly cleared it, another collection fee appeared. 70 million won would not make me wealthy, but it would let me stop measuring every decision against a dead man's hospital room. Her family owned the hotel, the wedding hall, the catering company, the jewelry boutique downstairs, and the finance company that loaned couples money when the first 4 businesses became too expensive. She asked whether I was available Saturday night. I told her my weekend rate doubled after midnight. She said the job required no equipment, only a clean suit and the ability to look sincerely interested in her. I assumed she wanted an escort for a corporate event. Then she placed a contract on my tool case titled Temporary Romantic Representation Agreement. The agreement required me to appear as her boyfriend for 12 weeks, attend 6 family functions, allow photographs, memorize a fictional first meeting, and never accept money or gifts from anyone connected to Myeong. The payment was 50 million won. That was more than I earned in 2 years, and exactly enough to clear my father's old medical debt, which had followed me even after his funeral. Saran did not pretend the arrangement was romantic. She explained that her uncle had already paid one former boyfriend to disappear and persuaded another man's employer to transfer him overseas. The last person who tried dating her seriously woke to find his parents' restaurant under a tax review. She wanted someone who understood the risk before accepting it. I asked why a woman with her face, education, and family name needed to rent a boyfriend from beneath a stage. Saran said 3 men were trying to decide whom she would marry, and none of them had bothered asking her. The first was her grandfather, who believed marriage was the safest way to prevent Myeong's voting shares from scattering after his death. The second was her uncle, Vice Chairman Yu Sang-min, who controlled the board but not enough shares to survive Saran inheriting her late mother's trust. The third was Kang Tae-sung, heir to Jinsung Capital, whose bank had financed half of Myeong's hotels and expected Saran to become part of the collateral. A clause in her mother's trust allowed Saran to reject a board-approved marriage if she could prove she had maintained a serious independent relationship for at least 90 days. Her mother, Yu Haejin, had died when Saran was 15. The public remembered a graceful hotel executive who funded scholarships and designed Myeong's first worker nursery. Saran remembered a woman who hid legal documents inside recipe books because she trusted family affection less than signed paper. That memory was the only reason Saran believed the trust had once protected her. The clause had been written to protect her freedom. Her uncle had turned it into an obstacle course by investigating, buying, or frightening away every man who came near her. She chose me because I had no company, no family influence, no public reputation, and no obvious ambition. In her words, I was too economically insignificant to negotiate with. I told her that was the most insulting job offer I had ever received. She increased the payment to 60 million. I accepted at 70. Before signing, I rewrote 4 sections. She could not control my private friendships, force physical affection, use my father's debt against me, or leave me legally responsible for statements her public relations team invented. Saran watched me edit the contract and asked where an audio technician had learned corporate language. I told her I had studied finance on scholarship until my father's hospital bills pulled me out of university. The contract rehearsal took place in a Myeong conference room with her attorney, Choi Mira, correcting every detail. We needed a first meeting, favorite foods, private jokes, and believable disagreements. I rejected the polished story her public relations team wrote and suggested the truth. We met under a wedding stage. She insulted my economic value, and I negotiated upward. Mira said no reporter would believe something that honest. Dropping out did not erase what I learned. It only changed where I used it. She signed my revisions without argument. That should have warned me. People like Saran did not agree quickly unless they had already calculated a larger advantage. Our first public appearance took place at the opening of Myeong's new riverfront hotel. Her family expected her to arrive beside Taesung. Instead, she stepped from the car holding my hand. Camera flashes hit us before my shoes touched the pavement. Saran leaned close and whispered that smiling was mandatory. I whispered back that 70 million did not include showing teeth. She smiled for both of us. Kang Taesung waited beneath the entrance lights. He was 33, handsome in the polished way of a man whose mistakes had always been removed before morning. He looked at our joined hands, then at my rented suit, and asked Saran whether she had hired entertainment for the evening. My rented suit pinched at the shoulders because Saran's stylist had measured me while I was repairing a speaker. I kept reaching for the screwdriver normally clipped to my belt. Saran quietly placed one inside her handbag before we entered, saying she preferred me prepared. That tiny gesture did more to calm me than the luxury car, the security team, or the 70 million won contract. I told him the entertainment department usually charged more for insecure audience participation. Saran squeezed my hand hard enough to punish me while still looking affectionate for the cameras. Her grandfather did not insult me. Chairman, you simply studied me as if I were a strange number on an audit sheet. Vice Chairman Sang-min was warmer. He welcomed me, asked where I lived, where I had studied, who my relatives were, and whether I had ever accepted cash jobs without invoices. Every question sounded friendly until I understood he was building a list of places to apply pressure. At dinner, Taesung announced that Jinsung Capital would refinance Myeong's maturing hotel debt if the company completed its planned family alliance before the next quarter. No one used the word marriage. They did not need to. Saran's future sat between the wine glasses like another signed contract. I asked whether a bank usually attached romantic conditions to commercial lending. Songmin's assistant later guided me toward a private lounge and offered expensive whiskey. He spoke casually about my landlord, Daeho's workshop license, and the unpaid balance on my father's treatment. He never made a direct threat. He simply demonstrated that Myeong could touch every weak point in my life without wrinkling a suit. Taesung replied that families with shared interests made reliable partners. I said reliable partners did not need one person trapped between them. The table went silent. Saran's grandfather looked amused. Her uncle looked annoyed. Taesung looked at me as though I had become more expensive to remove. For the next month, Saran trained me in the habits of her world. I learned which fork signaled old money, which smile meant no, and which family friends sold private conversations before dessert. I taught her how to eat noodles from a convenience store cup without staining her blouse, how to ride the last bus, and how to tell when a wedding hall technician was lying about a broken amplifier to charge overtime. Our contract required 3 dates. She chose an art auction, a private dining club, and a luxury brand launch because photographers would attend. I replaced one with a neighborhood night market. She protested until a vendor recognized her from television and charged her double for fish cake. Saran paid without complaint. Taesung asked whether I believed love could protect Saran when creditors arrived. I answered that his bank was creating the emergency it claimed only marriage could solve. He smiled and called that capitalism. Saran interrupted before I replied, saying capitalism involved prices and choices, while his proposal offered one price and removed every choice. It was the first time we fought as a team without rehearsing. Later, she admitted it was the first public place she had visited without an assistant arranging the crowd around her. The performance became easier when no cameras were near. That frightened both of us more than the cameras. At the second family dinner, Chairman Yu asked what I admired about Saran. The contract provided 6 approved answers: intelligence, discipline, elegance, loyalty, courage, and kindness. I said she was excellent at calculating the cost of every decision and terrible at recognizing when someone did not want to be purchased. Saran turned toward me slowly. I added that she listened after being challenged, which was rarer than kindness among powerful people. Her grandfather laughed. Her uncle did not touch his food again. 2 days later, the building owner raised my rooftop rent by 40%. The repair company that hired me regularly canceled every booking. My bank requested immediate verification of deposits from the previous year. Saran called it predictable pressure and offered to move me into a Myeong residence. I refused because becoming financially dependent on my fake girlfriend seemed like poor contract management. After the night market, we sat beside the river eating convenience store ice cream because Saran's driver had lost us in the crowd. She admitted she could not remember the last decision she made without calculating how the board would interpret it. I told her freedom was not the absence of consequences. It was being allowed to choose which consequences belonged to you. Instead, I borrowed space in my friend Odeho's electronics workshop and began repairing sound equipment directly for independent wedding halls. Daeho had known me since university. He believed every corporation was a machine designed to turn apologies into invoices. He also discovered that 3 cancellation emails sent to my clients had originated from an agency owned by Vice Chairman Sungmin's college roommate. Saran wanted to confront her uncle immediately. I told her evidence became weaker when anger delivered it too early. That was when she stopped treating me only as hired protection and began asking what I thought before acting. On the 87th day of our fake relationship, her mother's trust committee announced an emergency review. Sangmin claimed our relationship was fabricated because there had been no formal commitment, shared residence, or financial interdependence. The committee scheduled the hearing for the Myeong Grand Hotel Ballroom, turning Saran's private freedom into an event attended by lawyers, directors, and gossip reporters. Chairman Yu later asked me to remain after dinner. He said Saran had inherited her mother's talent for making defiance look reasonable. He wanted to know whether I planned to encourage it. I told him she did not require encouragement, only fewer men building cages and calling them umbrellas. He did not dismiss me after that, but he began watching more carefully. Her attorney said the simplest response was a public engagement. The trust could challenge a boyfriend, but an engaged partner triggered a separate 120-day protection period. Saran asked whether I would do it. Our original contract ended in 3 days. A fake engagement would place my name inside company filings, family litigation, and national news. I asked what happened after the protection period. She said she would use the time to remove the marriage clause, secure her shares, and end the engagement quietly. I asked what happened to me after that. She hesitated for less than a second, but I noticed. She had prepared compensation, confidentiality, relocation assistance, and legal protection. She had planned everything except the part where I remained a person after leaving her story. I should have refused. Then Taesung entered the ballroom early, accompanied by Jinsung Capital executives carrying revised loan documents. The new terms allowed his bank to take voting control of 3 Myeong hotels if Saran did not complete a board-approved marriage before the debt deadline. Daeho's workshop occupied the back half of an old electronics market. We slept beside stacked amplifiers, repaired banquet speakers at dawn, and ate meals over circuit boards. Losing corporate clients forced me to meet independent hall owners directly. I discovered most were not struggling from lack of customers. They were struggling because dominant hotels controlled suppliers, payment schedules, and search rankings. Her uncle had turned the trust hearing into a financial ambush. Saran stood beneath the ballroom lights with everyone waiting for her to choose between a husband and a default. I walked to the stage before she answered. I took the ring her attorney had prepared, faced the committee, and said I intended to marry you, Saran. The moment she placed the ring on my finger, a transparent silver screen appeared before my eyes. Counterweight system activated. A second line followed. Unequal agreement detected. One party possesses power without consent. Restore balance to generate capital. I stared at the floating words long enough for Saran to whisper whether I had forgotten my next sentence. The system displayed 3 rules. Capital could only come from value recovered through fair agreements. I could not use rewards to purchase affection. I could not hide material risk from the partner named in the activating contract. Then it identified the ballroom's first imbalance. Myeong owed 4.8 billion won to 72 small wedding vendors. The company had delayed payment while charging couples in full. The trust committee included 2 retired judges, a family accountant, Chairman Yu's oldest friend, and 1 representative chosen by Saran's late mother. That final seat had remained mysteriously vacant for years. Mira believed Sangmin delayed every nomination because 1 independent vote could expose how far the committee had drifted from the trust's original purpose. The system offered an initial counterweight credit of 30 million won if I created a settlement that restored bargaining power without forcing vendors to accept discounts. 30 million was not billionaire money. It was barely enough to survive one legal mistake. But unlike Saran's family, the system did not promise to rescue me. It asked me to create something worth rewarding. The trust committee recognized our engagement and paused the marriage review. Taesung congratulated us with the expression of a man watching someone sign their own eviction notice. After the cameras left, Saran asked why my hand had trembled. I told her the truth that mattered most. I had discovered evidence that Miriam was withholding vendor payments. I did not tell her about the floating system because I still did not know whether it was a miracle, a breakdown, or an extremely well-designed scam inside my own head. Saran searched the company records and confirmed the debt. Her uncle had moved cash from the wedding division to cover losses at a prestige resort. Saran's proposal included a monthly salary, legal insurance, and a private apartment under another name. She presented each protection calmly, but her fingers remained locked around the folder. I realized she was not only asking me to continue the performance. She was asking whether I would stand beside her after seeing exactly how frightening the stage had become. Small vendors were financing Miriam without consent while the company continued advertising perfect celebrations. Saran wanted to order immediate payment. The wedding division lacked enough liquid cash, and Jinsung Capital controlled its credit line. I proposed an escrow model. Couples' deposits would remain in protected accounts. Vendors would receive scheduled payments before Miriam collected its management fee. Sangmin rejected it because the company relied on unrestricted deposits to fund operations. I said that meant Miriam was using tomorrow's weddings to pay for yesterday's mistakes. The vendors formed a council after I showed them the contracts. Saran attended the meeting without assistance and listened while florists, photographers, caterers, musicians, and dressmakers described years of delayed payments. One photographer asked why he should trust the heiress whose name appeared on every invoice. Saran said he should not trust her name. He should trust only a structure that still worked when she failed. That answer changed the room. We created ValSafe, an independent escrow cooperative owned partly by vendors and partly by couples through refundable membership deposits. Taesung's revised loan package contained an acceleration clause hidden behind a definition change. If Miriam publicly rejected the alliance, Jinsung could classify the refusal as a governance event and demand repayment within 30 days. Mira found it only because I remembered a similar covenant from university. Poverty had interrupted my degree, but it had not removed the habit of reading what powerful people hoped others skipped. I invested my remaining savings and the 30 million system credit into building its payment software with Daeho. Saran convinced 12 Miriam halls to test it. Her uncle ordered managers not to cooperate. The vendors refused to accept new bookings without escrow. For the first time, Miriam needed the small businesses it usually treated as replaceable. Sangmin approved the pilot. Within 3 weeks, payment delays fell from 90 days to 48 hours. Couples received live budget tracking, and vendors stopped adding hidden risk fees to their prices. The system awarded me equity credits equal to the verified value recovered from canceled penalties, reduced financing costs, and previously unpaid invoices. My account did not suddenly fill with magical cash. Instead, the system gave me the right to purchase distressed ValSafe shares and vendor receivables at independently verified prices. I used those rights to become the cooperative's largest individual investor without taking control from the vendors. My stake was worth 1.2 billion won by the end of the month. I still lived above Daeho's workshop because selling the stake would weaken the company that created it. Nobody else reacted to the silver screen. Chairman Yu continued speaking, cameras continued flashing, and Saran's hand remained inside mine. The system's letters floated over her face without casting light. I wondered whether accepting a false engagement had broken my mind. Then it displayed Miriam's exact unpaid vendor total, including an invoice number Saran's own attorney had never seen. Saran discovered the valuation through a board report. She asked how an unemployed audio technician had become a major investor in a financial platform within weeks. I told her I had found capital willing to reward corrected contracts. That was technically true and emotionally dishonest. The system flashed a warning. Material risk withheld from contract partner. Future rewards limited. I understood the rule. Saran did not need to know every supernatural detail, but she needed to know that my resources could alter the engagement's power balance. I told her that an unknown mechanism had appeared during our engagement and was granting investment opportunities whenever I corrected unfair agreements. She stared at me for a full minute. Then she asked whether the mechanism had terms, whether it could disappear, whether it had access to her data, and whether accepting its capital created obligations she could not see. She did not ask whether I was insane. That was one reason I had begun falling for her. I showed her every message the system displayed by copying the words into a notebook. She created a risk register before believing any of it. The first system window included a balance sheet for the harm behind the number. Florists had borrowed against homes. Photographers had delayed replacing equipment. Caterers had used personal cards to buy ingredients. And musicians had accepted lower wages to keep crews together. The system did not count suffering as money. It measured the value others captured because those people lacked bargaining power. We agreed that I would never use system capital to buy Millionaire shares without telling her first, never tie her personal choices to my investments, and never let the engagement become financial leverage. The system removed the warning. Taesung responded to VouSafe by offering vendors immediate payment if they signed exclusive 5-year contracts with Jinsung Capital's new wedding platform. His platform paid quickly because it charged couples variable financing fees hidden behind service bundles. VouSafe could not compete with his cash. Within 10 days, 9 large vendors prepared to leave. The system identified another imbalance. Jinsung had bundled wedding deposits into short-term securities while keeping cancellation risk with couples and vendors. If public confidence fell, the platform would freeze withdrawals even though Jinsung continued collecting interest. I could expose the structure, but doing so immediately might cause the very panic that harmed couples. Saran suggested a quieter attack. We would offer vendors a shared emergency reserve funded by transparent insurance, then invite Jinsung clients to transfer without penalty. To create the reserve, we needed 20 billion won. Saran insisted on testing the system before trusting it. She asked me to correct a small contract at Daeho's workshop where temporary technicians carried equipment loss liability even when venues controlled storage. We rewrote the clause. The workshop's insurance cost fell, and the system granted a tiny purchase credit. Saran stared at the confirmation and said the impossible was easier to manage once it produced auditable paperwork. The system displayed a neglected asset, a nearly bankrupt Korean company called Clearweave that manufactured reusable smart fabric for hotel linens, stage curtains, and event decorations. Its technology reduced cleaning costs by 30%, but its founder had lost distribution after refusing to sell the patent to Millionaire. The company's debt could be purchased for 7 billion won. I had only a fraction of that in liquid funds. Saran offered personal money. I refused because her uncle could claim she was secretly transferring trust assets to her fiancé. Daeho and I approached the vendor council instead. 34 vendors invested small amounts. 2 laundries contributed equipment. A retired textile engineer accepted equity instead of consulting fees. I bought the remaining debt using system-backed purchase rights after Clearweave adopted worker representation, transparent licensing, and a guarantee against exclusive hotel contracts. Miriam's own wedding halls became Clearweave customers because the fabric saved more money than Songmin's objections cost. 6 months of projected savings allowed VouSafe to borrow against real contracts and create the emergency reserve. The first VouSafe prototype was ugly, slow, and held together by code Daeho wrote between amplifier repairs. Vendors could see deposits, but not withdraw them correctly. A florist accidentally received a caterer's payment notice, and the dashboard displayed one couple's wedding date as the year 2094. The mistakes embarrassed us, but vendors preferred visible mistakes to invisible decisions made by Millionaire accountants. Jinsung's platform lost its advantage. Taesung invited me to his office on the top floor of Jinsung Tower. He said he respected men who climbed quickly, especially those who understood that morality was easier after capital arrived. He offered to buy my VouSafe and Clearweave stakes for 90 billion won. The number made my mouth dry. I could pay every debt, buy a home, retire before 30, and never crawl under another wedding stage. The system remained silent. That meant the choice was mine, not a test. I asked what he would do with Valsafe. Taesung said he would integrate it into Jinsung's relationship finance division, where weddings, mortgages, insurance, and family wealth could become one lifelong customer journey. He described marriage as a subscription people could not cancel cheaply. I refused. He leaned back and said Saran had hired me because I was disposable. He had seen the original contract. Only Saran, her attorney, and I possessed copies. Taesung showed me a page containing the relocation clause she had prepared before our engagement. Clearweave's founder, Moon Sora, initially refused to meet me because she assumed I represented Myeryong. Her factory employed 43 people and smelled of detergent, heated fabric, and stubbornness. She had survived 3 acquisition attempts by mortgaging her apartment. What she lacked was not technology. It was enough time to prove the technology without surrendering it. It recommended sending me abroad for 2 years after the breakup to reduce media interest. Saran had not signed that page, but she had considered it. I left without showing Taesung how deeply the document had cut. When I confronted Saran, she admitted the page was real. Before knowing me, she had planned to move every risk away from herself, including the person she hired. She said she had removed the clause after the night market. I asked why she had never told me. She said because she was ashamed. I believed her. Believing did not erase the fact that our relationship began as a plan in which only one of us had a future. We ended the fake engagement that night. The announcement shocked her family and delighted Taesung. Reporters described me as a poor opportunist discarded after trying to enter a chaebol family. I returned the engagement ring. Saran returned the unused portion of our original contract payment, including penalties she insisted she owed. Neither of us said that ending the performance hurt more than continuing it. The counterweight system remained active. Ending the engagement did not end the danger. Songmin's media contacts published photographs of my rooftop room and claimed I had used Saran's loneliness to reach investors. Valsafe vendors received anonymous warnings that my access to Myeryong would disappear. Instead of leaving, the vendor council requested an emergency vote and publicly confirmed that its rules, not my relationship, protected their money. Its contract partner field changed from Wytho Saran to unresolved. A message appeared. Consent cannot be preserved through a false agreement. Build value without claiming the person you intended to protect. For the next 3 months, Saran and I worked separately. She challenged her mother's trust amendment in court and opened Myeryong's marriage-related financing records to independent review. I expanded Valsafe beyond weddings into deposits for funerals, school events, and community festivals, industries where customers paid early and small suppliers carried all the risk. Clearweave licensed its fabric openly to regional manufacturers and became profitable without depending on Myeryong. The system rewarded every verified improvement with purchase opportunities in neglected companies linked by the same pattern. I invested in a catering cold chain network whose drivers had been misclassified as contractors, a venue energy company whose patents were trapped in litigation, and a small insurer willing to publish every exclusion in plain language. I did not become rich by receiving endless money. I became rich by finding places where hidden risk made useful businesses appear worthless. Equalis began inside a borrowed glass office containing 4 mismatched chairs. I refused to name it after myself because the system rewarded structures, not heroes. Every investment committee included one worker representative from the company being evaluated. Professional investors called the rule inefficient until our first 3 turnarounds outperformed their private funds. Once the risk was shared honestly, their real value surfaced. Within a year, my holding company, Equalis Partners, controlled assets worth $1.4 trillion. The press still called me Saran's former rented boyfriend because the truth was less entertaining than the insult. Taesung persuaded Jinsung Capital to stop refinancing any Myeryong property that used Valsafe or Equalis services. Sangmin supported him. Together, they planned to force Saran's grandfather into choosing between the hotel group and his granddaughter's independence. Myeryong faced 900 billion won in maturing debt. Chairman Yu summoned Saran, Sangmin, Taesung, and me to the family residence. It was the first time Saran and I had stood in the same room since ending the engagement. She looked stronger and more tired. I wanted to ask whether she was eating properly. Instead, I asked whether her legal challenge had found the original trust documents. She said her mother's attorney had disappeared from public practice 11 years earlier, and every archive copy contained the marriage approval clause. Saran's search for Manhwa led through old scholarship lists, discontinued law offices, and a church registry on Jeju. She suspected the attorney had not vanished willingly. Someone had paid her settlement, closed her office, and placed a confidentiality agreement around her. Saran could have exposed the agreement immediately, but doing so might have frightened Manhwa before she understood who was asking. Chairman Yu admitted he had supported the amendment after his daughter died because he feared Saran would inherit enemies before learning to identify them. Saran asked whether he had ever considered teaching her instead of controlling her. The old man had no answer. Taesung offered a solution. Jin-sung would refinance the debt, Sang-min would remain vice chairman, and Saran would marry him within 60 days. In exchange, he would withdraw every lawsuit and restore her trust voting rights after the wedding. I asked why a marriage required more closing conditions than a shipping merger. Taesung said I was no longer involved. I placed an Equalis term sheet on the table. My company would refinance the full 900 billion won at a lower rate, but only if Millionaire separated voting control from marital status, adopted vendor escrow across all properties, and allowed employees to elect 2 directors. Sang-min laughed until Chairman Yu asked whether Equalis had the capital. I showed them committed funds from our insurance network, pension partners, vendor cooperative, and hotel energy assets. The Equalis refinancing package existed because thousands of small contracts supported it. Hotel kitchens bought cold chain services. Regional venues licensed Clearweave. Vousafe deposits generated predictable administration fees. None looked impressive alone. Together, they created cash flow stronger than Jin-sung's marriage condition. Taesung had concentrated power in one signature. I had assembled it from people he considered too small to matter. My net worth on paper had crossed 1 trillion won that week. Taesung's smile vanished when he realized the former audio technician could now outbid his bank. Saran did not look relieved. She asked whether my refinancing offer was another way to bind her choices to my money. That question mattered more than defeating Taesung. I withdrew the term sheet in front of everyone. Sang-min called me a fraud. I told Saran I would submit the offer through an open auction with identical terms available to any qualified lender. Equalis would receive no relationship rights, no private promise, and no advantage from our history. The system displayed a confirmation. Counterweight restored. Capital may proceed. Saran nodded once. It was not forgiveness. It was respect returning carefully. The auction attracted 4 international lenders after Equalis published Millionaire's real asset quality and separated the debt from the marriage dispute. Jin-sung lost the power to decide whether Millionaire survived. Equalis won only 40% of the refinancing package. The rest went to competitors under the same transparent terms. The open auction forced Millionaire to reveal weaknesses it had hidden for years. Several hotels looked luxurious but consumed enormous energy. 2 profitable venues depended on unpaid family labor from subcontractors. A coastal resort held valuable land but damaged the fishing village beside it. Saran accepted lower bids where lenders required environmental repair, proving she valued survival less than another polished illusion. I earned less than I would have through a private deal. The system rewarded me with access to a block of undervalued Jin-sung infrastructure bonds whose price had fallen because Taesung diverted capital into controlling Millionaire. I purchased them through the open market. When Jin-sung's regulators questioned its wedding securities, the bonds converted into voting shares under emergency stabilization rules. Equalis became Jin-sung Capital's 2nd largest shareholder. Taesung accused me of engineering the investigation. I published our purchase timeline, risk reports, and every communication with regulators. He had created the weakness himself by treating couples' deposits as cheap fuel. Meanwhile, Saran located her mother's missing attorney, Kim Manhwa, living quietly in Jeju under her married name. Manhwa produced a handwritten letter and the original trust appendix. The marriage approval clause did not exist. The real appendix stated that Saran's shares could never be transferred through marriage and that any trustee attempting to pressure her romantic choices would lose authority immediately. Someone had replaced the appendix after her mother's death. The document custodian at the time had been Sang-min. He denied forgery and claimed the substitute clause reflected Chairman Yu's verbal instructions. Manhwa did not hand Saran the original appendix immediately. She asked 3 questions only Haejin's daughter could answer. Which song her mother played while working, where she hid birthday gifts, and what sentence she repeated before difficult meetings. Saran answered the last one through tears. Her mother had always said that love without exit rights was only ownership wearing perfume. Chairman Yu said fear had made him approve control, but he had never authorized replacing his daughter's signed document. Saran could have sent her uncle directly into a public prosecution battle. Instead, she offered him one chance to disclose every altered trust record, hidden related party transaction, and private agreement with Jin Sung. Sangmin refused. He called an emergency board meeting and attempted to remove Saran from Myeong for exposing confidential family documents. Taesung promised Jin Sung's votes. Equalis now held enough Jin Sung shares to block him from voting on transactions involving his personal marriage agreement. At the board meeting, Sangmin presented Saran as emotional, disloyal, and dangerous to creditors. Saran presented 12 years of altered trust records, vendor diversions, and hotel contracts designed to increase dependence on Jin Sung. I presented nothing until asked. When Sangmin demanded to know whether I intended to marry Saran and seize Myeong, I answered that her company was not a dowry and my feelings were not a financing structure. During the board meeting, I watched Saran resist the temptation to become cruel simply because cruelty would now be effective. She could have released Songmin's private messages to humiliate him. She used only records tied to company decisions. That restraint cost her the loudest headlines, but it prevented accountability from becoming revenge. Employee directors, independent shareholders, and 2 family trustees voted to remove Sangmin pending investigation. Chairman Yu abstained. Saran asked why. He said voting against his son felt like admitting he had failed as a father. She replied that refusing to vote did not make the failure disappear. Sangmin left the boardroom without looking at either of them. Taesung's position at Jin Sung weakened after the regulators confirmed his platform had hidden liquidity restrictions from couples. His father offered Equalis a private deal: sell our shares, stop the investigation, and receive control of Jin Sung's hotel finance division. The system identified massive recoverable value. It also warned that accepting would preserve the same structure under my name. I rejected the deal and proposed converting affected wedding securities into direct claims owned by couples and vendors. Jin Sung would lose profit, but customers would regain control of their deposits. The restructuring passed because pension funds preferred a smaller certain loss over years of scandal. The Jin Sung restructuring required months of public meetings. Couples brought invitation cards, canceled venue receipts, and loan statements they had never understood. One groom admitted he had hidden the true financing cost from his fiancée because he was ashamed. VowSafe counselors treated the problem as shared information failure, not moral weakness. Transparency repaired relationships no bank had included in its calculations. Equalis earned enough conversion equity to become the largest shareholder in Jin Sung Capital. My net worth crossed 5 trillion won. I had become richer than Taesung, richer than Sangmin, and richer than most of the men who once treated Saran's marriage as a board resolution. Nothing about that made Saran mine. The system reminded me every time I saw her name. Affection has no acquisition price. After Songmin's removal, Saran became Myeong's interim chief executive. She closed 2 vanity resorts, sold the family jet, and used the money to pay every vendor still waiting under old contracts. Her grandfather complained about losing the jet until she showed him how many hotel workers' retirement contributions it equaled. He stopped complaining in public. Saran and I began meeting again through formal refinancing committees. At first, every conversation had an agenda, legal observer, and written minutes. Then one evening the meeting ended early, and neither of us left. She asked whether I still hated the relocation page. Our committee meetings became a strange form of courtship. Saran challenged every optimistic forecast I presented. I questioned every exception she requested for Myeong. When we agreed, both legal teams became suspicious. When we disagreed, employees relaxed because they knew the final decision had survived resistance from both sides. I said I hated that she once considered me movable. I also understood that she had survived by moving problems before they reached her. She said understanding was not forgiveness. I told her I was not ready to offer forgiveness as a reward for honesty. She smiled because that was the first completely honest conversation we had ever had. We started again without a romantic contract. Our first real date was at the same night market where she had once paid double for fish cake. The vendor recognized her and charged her correctly this time. She looked almost disappointed. We dated for 6 months without announcements. Taesung attempted one final attack by leaking the original fake boyfriend contract to the press. The country learned that Saran had hired me, negotiated my payment, and planned a staged relationship to defeat her family's marriage clause. Commentators called her manipulative and me fraudulent. Songmin's remaining allies demanded her resignation. Saran prepared a statement accepting responsibility and offering to step down after a shareholder vote. Her public relations team wanted to describe our current relationship as proof the fake arrangement had become true love. The public relations team drafted a sentimental timeline, claiming our fake love had gradually become real. It erased the breakup, the anger, and the months we worked apart. Saran deleted the presentation herself. She said a romance polished until nobody had done anything wrong was simply another advertisement, and we had already caused enough trouble by treating appearances as evidence. I refused to let our private life become a defense exhibit. At the press conference, Saran said she had hired a man because she believed money was safer than trust. She said the contract protected her freedom while ignoring the freedom of the person she hired. I said I accepted because poverty can make an unfair offer look voluntary. Neither of us asked the public to call the beginning romantic. We published the contract, every revision, every payment, and the date we ended it. Then we refused to answer whether we were dating. Miryong's employee council supported Saran because she had already changed the structures that allowed the deception. Shareholders kept her as chief executive by a wide margin. Taesung lost his remaining Jinsung position after investigators proved he had leaked client information through a media consultant. He left the country to manage a smaller overseas fund owned by his family. Sangmin eventually admitted replacing the trust appendix, though he insisted he had acted to preserve the group. Taesung's departure did not make him harmless. He called foreign investors and described Equalis as a political experiment disguised as finance. For several weeks our bond prices fell. I refused to use system rights to support them artificially. Employees watched the value recover only after operating reports proved the businesses were healthy, which gave them confidence no supernatural intervention could manufacture. The court removed him from every trustee role and ordered restitution for transactions that benefited his private companies. Chairman Yu visited him regularly, but never asked Saran to forgive him. That was the first boundary the old man finally respected. Equalis continued growing, but the system's rewards became smaller. A final message appeared on the second anniversary of our fake engagement. Ultimate imbalance detected. Subject: Miryong control. The system offered me a path to acquire 28% of Miryong at a deep discount. A group of foreign funds planned to sell after the scandal. With system rights and Jinsung financing, I could become the largest shareholder overnight. The reward condition appeared beneath it. Complete the original engagement through legal marriage. Consolidated ownership will maximize stability. For the first time, the system sounded exactly like the men we had fought. I asked whether it was testing me. No answer appeared. I asked whether marrying Saran would unlock the shares even if she did not want the acquisition. The system displayed one word. Yes. I understood then that the system did not possess morality. The system's final offer included projections showing extraordinary efficiency if Equalis and Miryong merged under our marriage. Duplicate departments would disappear, financing costs would fall, and I could prevent another Sangmin from threatening Saran. Every number looked reasonable. That was what made it dangerous. Control rarely introduced itself as greed when it could arrive dressed as protection. It measured imbalance and searched for efficient counterweights. If I became powerful enough, it was willing to solve coercion by placing control in my hands. I declined the acquisition. The screen warned that the opportunity would expire permanently. I declined again. The silver interface cracked across the center. Final reward forfeited. System termination pending. Before it vanished, I transferred every temporary purchase right into public rules Equalis could operate without me. Independent valuation, worker consent, open bidding, and conflict disclosure. The system confirmed that all previously earned assets were backed by real value and would remain. Then it disappeared. I felt less powerful and more free. Saran knew something had happened before I explained it. I told her about the Miriam offer, the marriage condition, and my refusal. She became angry, not because I had rejected control, but because I had faced the decision alone after promising not to hide material risks. She was right. I apologized without explaining that I wanted to protect her from the insult. Saran's anger lasted 3 days. She did not block my calls, but every answer became one sentence. When we finally met, she asked why I trusted her to reject Taesung but not to help reject the system. I had no answer except fear. She said fear deserved compassion, not decision-making authority over another adult. Protection without information was simply a kinder word for control. 3 weeks later, Saran called me to the Miriam Grand Hotel ballroom, where our fake engagement had begun. The room was empty except for Daeho, her attorney, the vendor council chairwoman, and Chairman Yu eating snacks in the back row. Saran placed a new contract on the stage. It was 6 pages long. The first page stated that neither party would gain voting rights, management authority, inheritance claims, or financial guarantees solely through marriage. The second protected separate property. The third required disclosure of conflicts involving Equalis and Miriam. The fourth said either person could refuse publicity without explanation. The fifth contained no romance at all. It listed emergency contacts, medical preferences, and who would care for Daeho's terrible dog if both of us traveled. The 6th page was blank except for one handwritten question. Will you marry me when neither of us needs the contract to survive? I read it twice. Then I told her the dog clause required further negotiation. The new marriage agreement had been drafted by separate lawyers paid from separate accounts. Mira represented Saran. Nari Han, an Equalis governance attorney with no loyalty to romance, represented me. They argued for 2 weeks over medical authority, public statements, and whether gifts from our companies counted as related party transactions. Saran called the process exhausting. I called it strangely reassuring. She said the offer expired in 10 seconds. I signed on the 9th. Our real engagement announcement contained no staged photographs. We released one picture taken by the night market vendor. Saran was laughing with sauce on her sleeve, and I was holding 2 paper cups like a man who had forgotten cameras existed. The photograph became more valuable to the press than every luxury image Miriam had ever arranged. Chairman, you offered us the grand ballroom for the wedding. Saran chose a renovated community venue operated by vouchsafe vendors. The florists owned part of the building. The caterers received payment before the ceremony. The musicians controlled their recording rights. Guests could see exactly where the event budget went. Daeho handled the sound and nearly ruined the vows by testing the microphone too loudly. Chairman Yu walked Saran halfway down the aisle, then stopped. He told her the rest should be her choice. She walked the remaining distance alone. Chairman Yu's decision to stop halfway down the aisle was not planned. Later he admitted he had suddenly remembered walking Saran's mother toward a marriage she chose freely. He realized he had spent years honoring his daughter's memory while violating the principle she had protected for her own child. The apology came too late to erase anything, but not too late to change his final steps. When she reached me, I remembered the first ring, the silver screen, and the ballroom full of people waiting to trade her future. This time, no trust committee watched. No bank waited behind the flowers. No system calculated the value of our decision. I promised to tell her when I was afraid, especially when secrecy felt protective. She promised never to turn preparation into permission to move other people. We did not promise never to make mistakes. Our entire relationship existed because both of us had made too many already. After the wedding, reporters called me the real billionaire groom. The title made it sound as if wealth had transformed a hired boyfriend into someone worthy of love. The truth was the opposite. I became worthy of standing beside Saran only when I stopped using wealth to prove I could. Equalis eventually became larger than Jinsung Capital and more valuable than Miriam. We never merged the companies. Saran remained Miriam's chief executive. I remained chairman of Equalis under a board that could remove me. We created a permanent conflict wall between Equalis and Miriam. Neither company could appoint the other's executives, guarantee its debts, or exchange confidential customer information. Financial reporters predicted the marriage would make those rules impossible to enforce. 5 years later, Regulators used them as a model for other families whose private relationships crossed public companies. When our companies worked together, independent directors negotiated the contract while we left the room. Chairman Yu retired and converted part of his family shares into an employee and vendor trust. He said he had spent 60 years building a family business and only recently learned that family ownership did not guarantee family care. Daeho became chief technology officer of ValSafe and continued dressing like someone who had lost an argument with a toolbox. The vendor council expanded escrow protections across South Korea's event industry. Couples still overspent on weddings. At least they could now see who received the money. Clearweave became an international textile company owned partly by its workers and regional license partners. The audio equipment I repaired beneath wedding stages became museum pieces faster than I expected. I kept one damaged microphone in my office. It reminded me that my life changed while I was making someone else's promise sound convincing. Taesung returned to Korea years later for a financial conference. Taesung and I spoke after the conference without reporters. He admitted he had never considered himself controlling. His father had taught him that providing certainty was the highest form of care. I told him certainty imposed from above was comfortable mainly for the person defining it. He did not agree, but he listened longer than he once would have. He congratulated me with perfect manners and asked whether I believed love had truly defeated capital. I told him love had defeated nothing. Transparent contracts, distributed power, patient evidence, and people willing to walk away had defeated him. Love only gave us a reason not to become the next version of him. Sangmin never returned to Myeong. He built a small consulting practice after completing restitution and occasionally sent Saran business articles without messages. She read some and deleted others. Forgiveness remained her choice, not a family obligation. On our 5th anniversary, Saran found the original fake boyfriend agreement inside my office safe. She asked why I kept it. I said it was the first contract we ever corrected together. She pointed out that I had demanded 70 million won after pretending to be insulted. I said negotiation was not exploitation when both sides could walk away. She reminded me that I had been facing inherited medical debt and canceled work. I admitted the system had taught me something uncomfortable. A signature could be legal and still fail to represent freedom. Saran read the original contract again and noticed a clause neither of us remembered. During public appearances, I had been required to remain within 3 meters of her. She measured the distance across my office, then stood 4 meters away and asked whether I felt abandoned. I told her I finally felt off duty. She crossed the room anyway. We placed the old contract beside our marriage agreement. One began with money because we did not trust each other. The other protected money because we finally did. People still told the story as if a poor man had been hired by a rich girl, awakened a system, defeated arrogant heirs, and won both a fortune and a bride. That version was not entirely false. It was simply arranged like a luxury wedding photograph, beautiful, expensive, and cropped to hide the workers holding everything upright. I had been poor enough to mistake payment for choice. Saran had been powerful enough to mistake planning for consent. The system had been useful enough to mistake efficiency for justice. We changed because every time one of us gained leverage, the other asked who had lost the ability to say no. The fake relationship saved Saran from one forced marriage. The real relationship survived only because neither of us demanded that rescue become ownership. Years after the system vanished, I sometimes wondered whether another person had received it. The thought worried me more than losing it. A tool capable of revealing unfair value could repair thousands of lives or justify a perfect dictatorship. Equalis therefore published every method we developed, ensuring no future founder needed a miracle to build the same protections. I entered the ballroom as a hired boyfriend whose rented suit still carried a technician's screwdriver in the pocket. I left the same ballroom years later as a billionaire groom. But the greatest difference was not the number in my account. It was that the second time I placed a ring on Saran's hand, nobody had purchased the answer.